Happiest CEO, the podcast built on the belief that success is achieved by design and happiness is made by choice. We cover a lot of ground on this channel because being the CEO of your own life means taking ownership of every layers of your well-being. Today we are supercharging our health foundation by exploring one of the most frontiers of longevity and physical recovery, cell regeneration. So ask yourself, what if you accelerate healing, sharpening your mental clarity and boosting your daily energy from the deep cellular level up? Simplify by changing how your body absorbs oxygen. Today I'm joined by health expert and entrepreneur and longevity expert and beautiful person, Jason Gilbert.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Human extraordinary. Jason is a passionate advocate for proactive health and peak performance for over 30 years. Basically all his life he has been breathing health and longevity, a very inspirational figure in the scene. And he's a co-founder of Cell Regen, a leading brand innovative state-of-the-art hyperbaric oxygen chamber manufacturer and distributor. And in this episode, we unpack how hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually works, the science of cellular healing, and how optimizing your physical body at the most foundational level, giving you the energy to thrive in every area of your life. Please welcome Jason Gilbert. Hey, Jason.
Sebastian, thank you very much, mate. It's an honor to be here, and I love talking health. So we're going to have a good one today.
Oh, wonderful. So basically, Jason, you have been in the health scene for a long time, but at one stage you came across hyperbaric chambers. When was that?
Look, I first was introduced to hyperbaric oxygen therapy 15 years ago when I had mercury toxicity off the charts. My case was one of the worst cases, or the worst case that the doctors I was dealing with had ever seen.
Wow.
Yep. And part of the journey was obviously detoxing from mercury, and this is why I used it. Okay. But if we go way back, well before I was even exposed to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I understood clearly the importance of oxygen because my mum smoked when she was pregnant.
Wow.
Or during pregnancy, and I was born asthmatic.
Wow.
Well, when I say born, not long after. So in those early years of life, being someone with asthma and trying to gasp for air.
Really?
Yeah, like you appreciate something that most people don't ever think about because from the second we are born to our last breath of life, we never question why we're breathing. What's the purpose of breathing? And that's to get oxygen into the body.
Right.
And so I guess this evolution through health and our family owning a health food store when I was a kid and working there and learning and being fascinated by longevity and everything that's involved with optimizing health to get to this part of my career and have been a patient with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And then my mum also on her cancer journey using it as an important tool.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful moment to be really immersed in this.
Yeah.
And it's an exciting time because people are realizing via research how important it is for physiological function and to allow the body to do its job to, I guess, confront any challenge that's appearing in the future. So it's a nice time.
It's the worst time, it's the best time at the same time, right? It depends on how you look at it. But yes, it is an amazing technology. Can you give us sort of the basics of how it works?
Okay, so we've just talked about how important oxygen is. When we say important, we know it's important because we have a whole function called respiration around breathing in air, which contains 21% oxygen, okay? And then expiring CO2. What actually happens, and this is the part that most people don't stop to think about, but the whole reason we need oxygen in our body when we breathe it in is that oxygen is taken by red blood cells. I do this because that will represent a red blood cell that takes the oxygen all around the body to every cell, tissue, and organ of the body, particularly the cells, obviously. Now, oxygen is the fuel for the mitochondria of the cells. Every single cell in our body has mitochondria except the red blood cells that carry oxygen. Right. Okay? So our red blood cells are practically full. And when I say full, I mean saturated. We're all about 96 to 98% saturated most of the time. Yeah, so different to other, let's say, challenges or goals in our health where, let's say, we want to improve our health via diet. We have choices. We choose healthier food. We buy healthier food at the supermarket. Or improve our cardiovascular fitness and strength. We exercise. We have choice in that. We cannot choose to get more oxygen into the cell, the red blood cell, knowing that it's almost fully saturated. However, when we recognize that many conditions that we suffer during our life, whether it be, let's say, concussion from a head trauma, traumatic brain injury, neurological conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, whether it's, I guess, recovering from an injury, a car accident, severe situations that need oxygen for healing. Well, obviously, if we need to get it there and we're relying on respiration, we're falling short. And so the beautiful thing about the chamber, the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, is that when you're in that chamber under pressure, we can use pressure combined with higher concentrations of oxygen. So once again, the 21% in air goes to 80 to 95% when you're in a mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber. Combined with pressure, which is, the real magic thing here, then we get a huge amount of oxygen into the plasma.
So okay, there's a difference. So you're saying blood cells are already saturated, so they can't carry more than they have capacity, and that's basically already
that's right.
on the limit.
And they're carried around the body by plasma, which is the liquid in the blood that takes them everywhere. So we're bypassing the red blood cell. We're hacking this to get oxygen into the plasma.
Oh.
Which would usually only carry less than 2% oxygen. We're getting, when you're at 2 atmospheres, a 2,000% increase in oxygen to the plasma.
Oh, wow.
So, we've gone from understanding that it's vital for life, and also understanding that certain and many conditions around health need oxygen to heal. And we've got a way of getting it there. It's incredible.
Incredible. So basically, we're breathing in 80 to 90% oxygen, and it goes through our lungs, and our lungs, instead of putting more on blood cells because they're already full, maybe they get a little bit of a top up, but basically they're full under normal conditions. It goes through the lungs then into the plasma that moves the red blood cells around, but then also give it off, like the plasma can actually also deliver it then to our cells.
Totally, yeah. And the pressure helps that once again. So let's imagine, I like to refer to these conditions in our body as micro injuries or injuries themselves. Like everybody understands that if we have an injury to our shoulder or our knee, shoulder or knee, that, that's an injury.
Yep.
And we know that there's an inflammatory process involved. We know that blood can take anti-inflammatory cytokines to the area and deal with pro-inflammatory cytokines. So it can move that healing process. We get that, okay? We understand that. So, but at a micro level, or actually I should say not at a micro necessarily, but at a level that we can't see, there's also injuries to, let's say, our brain in a trauma situation, concussion. Let's look at Alzheimer's or conditions of the brain where neurologically it's been challenged in its function. Let's imagine also accidents, or post-surgery or inflammatory conditions, gut problems. This is why it's confusing a lot of people, because there's a whole array of conditions and patients that will say, I did mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy and this is what happened with my body. And we'll go into that. We'll understand why that happens at a physiological level. But if we're looking at symptomatically, this confuses people because how can one thing help so many problems?
Yeah.
And that is because oxygen is a requirement of life, and we have a way of delivering oxygen to the cell. And when those cells receive more oxygen under pressure, they are not only increasing the efficiency of the mitochondria. Remember, we mentioned the mitochondria create energy in the cell for that cell participating in any given organ to do its job better.
Amazing.
So let's imagine it's a liver cell, it will detox better. Let's imagine it's a neuron, it will function better.
Wow.
Okay? And at the same time, it increases the number of mitochondria. And this is after a very short amount of sessions. We're not talking going to the gym, let's say, and losing weight and putting on muscle mass over 6 to 12 months. We're talking about 10 to 20 sessions.
Amazing.
And many other reactions happen after your first session.
Yeah. So mitochondria, we have, I think there's about 100 to 200 per cell. So it increases as well as gives it more energy. So, a cell, I think, is also measured in output of voltage. I would probably say the voltage is probably coming up. The opposite, by the way, and of course you know that, if the voltage of a cell drops below a particular part, it is considered not healthy anymore and the body will disperse off it. Like, in a very simplified way,
Sure.
that's one indication of like, okay, the cell needs to be replaced now.
Sure.
So when you talk about oxygen, it's going the other way and saying like, we vamp you up back to optimal again.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, you've probably heard of a process called autophagy, where the body clears out dead cells. Well, often as we age, especially, it's challenged in its ability to clear off those cells so that they can be replaced by new cells.
Wow.
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy increases autophagy.
Yeah, wow.
Just like, let's say, water fast do. So a lot of people are doing things for certain benefits. When you combine them, you get even more benefit. But autophagy is one of those functions for sure.
That is amazing. And when we talk about inflammation and you say it reduces that, is that because you have cells that are optimized, or is that a slightly different effect of the oxygen?
Different effect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually happening at a genetic level. So this is interesting that while you're in, a lot of people understandably would think that the benefit is happening in that hour that you're in the chamber, let's say. However, there's many more benefits at a genetic level in the 24 hours after a session.
Huh.
And that is because, for example, we talk about inflammation, the pro-inflammatory cytokines, that are in our body that are increasing, that are perpetuating inflammation, are down-regulated. The anti-inflammatory cytokines are upregulated. So they're going to fight inflammation, and the pro-inflammatory cytokines are lowering. So you can imagine inflammatory processes, which form a large part of most pathologies, are inflammation's being decreased. Now, interestingly, when we're talking pressure, and I imagine we'll talk a little bit more about pressure so people understand, but a lot of people think, oh, more is better, stronger is better, higher pressure is better. Not at all, okay? One of our, I guess, colleagues that we can be very grateful for is Dr. Jason Gilbert in the States, and he has done a recent study showing that there are genetic benefits, let's talk about the cytokines that are activated at 1.3 atmospheres or 1.5, and then other ones at 2. So that if you go to 2 every session, depending on your challenge, because remember, everybody has a different situation, then you might be, by going to 2, missing out on the full benefits that you would get if you're at 1.3.
Let's quickly clarify this term. So atmosphere is basically meaning how much higher the pressure is compared to normal, right?
Fantastic. So right now, we are here at 1 atmosphere. This is atmospheric pressure. And this is very important if we're looking at what is actually helping when we breathe in oxygen. What's helping the oxygen cross the lung, the alveoli, to the bloodstream, and then the blood getting it to the cell, through the cell membrane, to the mitochondria. So to be able to do that, the pressure must come from a higher place to an increasingly lower pressure.
Is that right?
Yeah, so that's how this situation works when we breathe. Now, all we're doing in that chamber is we're increasing the pressure to speed up that process or facilitate it.
That is amazing. So basically what you're saying is if we are in a normal atmospheric pressure, our body already creates a bit of an uneven pressure situation so that oxygen is drawn in a sense to a lower pressure that we have within our liquid or within...
Basically every tissue that I just mentioned is going from a high to a lower situation. And the inverse is applicable when CO2 leaves the tissue to be able to be expired from the body. So this is all pressure related. And if we're talking about atmospheres, right, let's imagine that we know that when we go to high altitude.
Yes, as performance athletes often do on purpose, right?
It's harder to get oxygen. So a lot of people think there's less oxygen at high altitude. No.
That's not the case.
Not the case. There's always 21% oxygen in air. However, there's less pressure.
Yes.
That's why it's
the
harder
function
to
doesn't
get
work.
it there. Exactly. So athletes go there to hack that for a different reason, because when you're there long enough, your body will create more red blood cells.
And then, so you adjust to it in a sense?
Well, you adjust to it,
degree.
of course you do. Yeah, you can become fitter because you have the red blood cells, but that's using that mechanism of the transport via the red blood cell. Now, let's go from altitude to depth. So as we come down and we pass this level here where we're at to below sea level, pressure increases. Different to altitude. So as pressure increases, okay, so at 1.3 atmospheres, we're at 9 feet underwater. There's a lot of magic that happens there. You know, so at that level with more pressure, imagine we weren't breathing in an increase in oxygen, okay, which we get through the mask. You'd still get, and you do get, amazing benefits from the pressure alone. And there's been an interesting transition where hyperbaric oxygen chambers went from hospitals for diving injuries, for crush injuries, for necrosis, for life-threatening conditions. And in the States, there's 15 conditions that are covered by insurance, but they are life-threatening conditions. There's been, I guess, an evolution where years ago, when I first did this, it was a soft chamber, 1.3 atmosphere maximum with no supplemental oxygen. So supplemental oxygen means the oxygen that a condenser is bringing into the chamber and you're breathing in. I didn't have that. But 1.3 atmospheres without that oxygen still increases and activates a whole variety of physiological functions. Yeah.
So, and when you talk just about the oxygen observation into the plasma, that even happens if you only breathe in like 21% oxygen under 1.3.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So okay.
Because once again, it'd be easy to think because it's a hyperbaric, which increased pressure oxygen chamber. It's easier to jump over the baric and go to the oxygen and think it's all about the oxygen.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
That's something obviously that when we can condense that oxygen from ambient air and put it in through a mask, great, we get more benefit still. But if it was just pressure alone, we get a huge amount of, we get significant benefit. So for many years when it was the soft chambers, why were they soft? And what are the limitations around being a soft chamber? Is that obviously they can't contain higher pressures because their seams will open and the pressure will escape. And in these last 10, 15 years, let's say, they've come up with chambers that are more hospital-like in regards to being made out of steel and containing more pressure, while at the same time not requiring pure oxygen, which the hospital chambers use, and that is injected past inside the chamber.
Right, so they come up with bottles of pure oxygen, whereas the condenser is 10% less. It's still 80 to 90%, depending on the source oxygen in the air.
Yeah, well, there's a few things, though. Like hospitals were the only places typically that would have the money and the oxygen to be able to spend $2,500 per hour to inject oxygen straight into the chamber.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one thing. Second thing, higher pressure. So typically you can get hospital chambers that go up to 6 atmospheres, which is a whole different ball game.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. But it's very controlled, and I would say you've got to follow strict safety protocols.
Yeah.
And this is why there's also a confusion around the safety of mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because some people think of, let's say, the bends, okay, decompression sickness when you're diving. Yeah, that can happen in a chamber when you're getting past that 3, 4, 5, 6 atmospheres, okay? That doesn't happen in a chamber of 2 atmospheres because we don't get the bends coming up from 33 feet underwater. So that's one thing that's important. The second thing is oxygen toxicity. Okay, you put pure oxygen in that chamber and you're taking it up to 4, 5, and 6 atmospheres, you're dealing with a whole different reality around oxygen toxicity, which isn't the case in mild.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. So of course, the blood cells, if they have any deficiency of oxygen carrying, they get all what they want in 6 atmospheres. But then if you have the plasma already observing in 2 atmosphere, 2,000% of what they normally do, whatever the mass would be, if it's normally 2% in it and you push that into it, that's already a lift. If you then go times 6, so that's 3 times as much as 2 atmospheres. Gee, that's saturation of oxygen everywhere.
Exactly. Now, what happens at that pressure? The brain, it's one of the most metabolic active organs in the body.
Okay.
But it's also a very sensitive organ. So when you go to those higher pressures, okay, it can affect the oxygen toxicity and potentially challenge a situation of a brain injury. It will happen and the brain recovers fast. It's just that if we want this for longevity purposes or the purposes that we're referring to in regards to what mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy can help with, we want mild, then we don't run that risk. Does that make sense? Hospitals are covered, these conditions cover insurance, the certain problems that insurance covers, I should say, for life-threatening situations. Yeah. Whereas for mild, what has basically happened is that a whole lot of research has been done, and many people are unaware of just how much research there is behind what we're talking about. I don't know of another modality in biohacking. I don't particularly like to use that terminology, but let's say this health optimization area that has so much study. Like, I'd encourage anyone online to go to Google Scholar, put in hyperbaric oxygen therapy and put a condition in there, and they will find what has been studied already. And the gold standard for studies is typically 1.5 atmospheres. I'm not saying all of them are, but that's the gold standard. 40 sessions, 1.5 atmospheres.
From an oxygen saturation point of view, higher pressure or higher oxygen saturation in what you breathe in must help that part, but there's of course much more to it and other benefits. But would you agree, like when it comes to how much oxygen is actually coming into the body, it depends on the concentration that you breathe in plus the pressure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a function
most
of
definitely the pressure combined with that oxygen. Now, back to that chamber, the hospital chamber quickly. The reason why there's safety issues is because when you have 100% oxygen in a chamber, under that sort of pressure, oxygen's an accelerant. Many people think that it causes explosions. No, it just means that if there's a spark or something like, even from clothing, polyester clothing, that could cause a little bit of static electricity, that's an accelerant, okay? However, you don't have that problem in a mild chamber because you have a mask, okay, or a cannula that's delivering the oxygen directly to your body. So the levels of oxygen in the chamber are very low.
Gotcha.
Very low, okay?
Hey, can I just go back? You were talking about diving, and I was wondering whether that is one of the original sort of indication that there is health benefits when you look at, I heard that, people look at divers and realize like, hey, something is different with them. Do you know a bit about that?
I'm glad you mentioned that. So the hyperbaric oxygen therapy was originally developed for decompression sickness when divers were coming up too fast and the nitrogen molecules didn't have time to reabsorb. Okay, so they'd form gas bubbles in joints, in important tissues, in the brain, in the lung. So into the chamber in a controlled environment could help those bubbles, I guess, what was the word I used before? Absorb again. Now, with divers, they noticed that, okay, what else? What's a diver doing? A diver's at depth, sometimes very deep, and breathing a percentage of oxygen depending on what type of tank they're using. Because they can have nitrox, they can have different combinations of gases there as well. But they were noticing divers. I've got a friend actually, he's 81, and he's taken up diving 6 years ago, and he's just done his 1,000th dive. He's powering. And so they're starting to make this correlation between, and divers were themselves, certain health conditions that they had that were managing via their diving or that were improving. And early scientists thought that it was the serotonin that they might have had an increase in because they're in nature and they're stimulated, but it's actually not that. It's actually this phenomena that we're talking about, pressure and oxygen combined.
So it's sort of like an accidental oxygen therapy and chamber down there by having the pressure and, well, potentially also more oxygen in your tank, but even if not, as you explained, the pressure is what will drive it into the plasma.
And funny enough, the growth of hyperbaric oxygen therapy to get to this point where miles is in houses, domestically, in medical clinics. We have the studio, Breathe Studios in Byron Bay.
One of yours at my house.
Yeah, exactly. But to get to that point, it wasn't, I guess, a realization where they go, oh, this is the case, we'll build on that. No, it would go through long periods of time where nothing happened, where it went to the hospitals. That was important because they realized they could treat other conditions with it, like literally treat and save lives with it, and then it'd stay there for a while. But for one reason or another, it just didn't go to the correlation to health optimization. And this is what I always tell my patients, and I've worked in health for almost 4 decades. The miracle here is the body. Only the body can heal itself. People need to understand this, yeah? But when it has the conditions to heal itself and it's not having the blockages stopping it from healing, it will do its job. And so I think to get to this point where we're at right now, we're seeing that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a really important tool in the process of the body being able to heal itself. But of course we need to keep it in context and think, well, if this is a lifestyle related problem and the person's not changing the factors that have put them in ill health in the first place, then they need to be looked at as well. And it's also very difficult when people, let's say we've got 2 people coming in with Alzheimer, let's say, or mold, okay? Mold's a very common challenge in the Northern Rivers, for example.
Yeah,
we've had cases come in and they are blown away after 3 sessions of mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy, that their brain is back, that they can focus, that they're happier, that they get out of bed with a spring in their step and they're finally going up to the lighthouse to do the lighthouse walk that everyone loves to do around here. Whereas others with apparently the same situation who continue feeding that mold via regular alcohol, sugar, simple carbohydrates, all the wrong stuff, will not get the same optimized effect. So it makes sense, doesn't it? It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
We can go to the gym with all the best intentions, but if we're not looking at our sleep, okay, our stress levels, our diet, we're not going to get the results we want. Yeah, and I think this is a beautiful thing today where we're seeing that lack of health is not usually due just to one factor. Okay, so hopefully people listening, they're not in a situation where they have a pathology and they're forced to only focus on the pathology. Okay, but if they do, by the way, they can only ever understand that if they're focusing on a disease, they'll never get healthier. Okay, if their symptoms are improving just by treating a disease and its symptoms, they're not focusing on their health.
Yeah.
They need to come back and do that. And this is what I love about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, is that we live in a busy world. And a lot of people go, look, I can't do everything. And understandably, you know, we've got to be very mindful when we deliver protocols and advice to people in regards to changing their lifestyle.
Yep.
However, when they're in that moment, whether it be where they're symptomatic, where there's less energy, they've got brain fog, gut problems, autoimmune problems, whatever it is, the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, when they're in there, a whole lot of benefits occur on so many different physiological levels, which I really want to mention as well, and I will, occur. So that if it's the only thing someone can do for 1 hour every, once again, depending on their protocol, but whether it's every week or every 2 days or whatever it is, then my goodness, it's low-lying fruit, low-hanging fruit, easy to go.
Coming back to the first example you brought up was just the black mold, and I don't know if we understand why it works, but maybe this is an example of explaining why a specific pathology, as you call it, is affected so strongly by this therapy. Do you know what's happening?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and mold's a great example.
Yeah.
Things like mold, anaerobic bacteria, cancer cells, hate oxygen. Mold thrives in environments where oxygen is there, right? So let's imagine, who knows? Let's imagine smoking combined with dietary situations where, following the Western diet, whatever else has happened in that person's life, maybe they're not circulating oxygen via exercise, poor sleep, all the rest. That's allowing an environment to occur that will allow mold or anaerobic bacteria to thrive. So if we want to get in there and change that, often it takes time for someone to come in and change their diet, change the quality of their water, change their exercise, introduce that. Life doesn't always permit these things fast. However, jumping into a chamber, you're actually passive. And when we understand that a lot of those nasties hate oxygen, you're looking at that angle. Secondly, we've already talked about decreasing pro-inflammatory cytokines and increasing anti-inflammatory cytokines, We're talking also about neurogenesis. That's the creation of new neurons. When I went to university, we were taught that neurons die and that if they're dead, they don't come back.
Yes, I grew up that way.
Yep.
It's pretty depressing.
What we know now is that after 10 sessions in a hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, you are stimulating neurogenesis. And after 10 sessions, you're also stimulating angiogenesis, the creation of new blood networks.
Wow.
So imagine old injuries, imagine a stroke, okay, or some sort of damage that traumatic brain injury has caused to the brain. Wow, that's exciting.
Yes.
Okay, we've talked about mitochondria. So every cell with mitochondria that are more efficient and more in numbers as well, it's going to have more energy to do its job.
Yes.
Stem cells. Now, I've been to Panama to do a very expensive stem cell procedure. A lot of my clients have as well. Guess what? After about 5 sessions, in the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, you have a significant increase. They say up to 8 times more stem cells released because the majority of the stem cells are produced in the bone marrow. What's pressure do? It actually affects the bone marrow as well.
It does, yeah.
Stimulate the production and release of stem cells.
Incredible.
Okay? Telomeres. The telomeres, the end of our chromosomes. So this is also something in the last 10 to 20 years in science.
Well, you can extend it with...
You actually can extend
Okay, so
it.
same thing. I grew up with the thing of like, you basically, if you have less than 5,000, I think, less telomeres left in terms of the length of it in your DNA, and that's all the DNA in your body basically sort of always loses a little bit when they separate, like when they multiply, right? When they become a new cell, they lose a telomere or two or whatever. So I was basically taught you can slow it down, but 5,000 is basically if you have less than that, you're dead or you're close to death.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So let's imagine, I like this way of explaining it. It's a long thread, and we've got more or less 120 little pieces on the end, right? And so let's represents the potential for the human to live.
And that's in every cell, right?
Yeah, on the chromosome. So they shorten with time. Yeah. And until recently, in the health world, anything that was seen to slow that down or pause it is seen as a success. Now, a study out of Israel, I think it was 2019, showed that hyperbaric oxygen therapy can actually increase telomere length.
No.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You know, combine that with, you know, mitogenesis, the creation of more mitochondria, and the other things we talked about. It's a really important tool for longevity.
Yes.
When I say longevity, I'm not talking about living longer. I'm talking about living to your maximum as long as you can. Then it's an exciting tool, because if we're looking at things like this, I also want to clarify that it's any condition that we may confront with time, and obviously with age, we're more susceptible to suffer, I guess, if we have a trauma, it's slower to heal. Okay, if we have a brain trauma, it's slower to heal as well, or a pathology. For many elderly people, it's a lot easier for that to evolve compared to a young person. Well, that's what I see as interesting. It better equips us to deal with what we'd still be confronted with, but in a stronger manner, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And plus, obviously, anything else that comes along the way, just like we'd need to look and see, okay, there's toxicity going on. Is there an excess of toxins or an insufficiency of nutrients? We need to look at that. But with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and we're recognizing that oxygen has a huge role and benefit on so many levels, then we can understand why this is such an important tool for so many, I use the word challenges, but for so many goals.
Yeah.
And that goal could be, as I said, longevity, aging well, having more energy, recovering from surgery, recovering from an injury, pre-sport, you know, having more energy to be able to exercise. And then the other ones, such as getting over illnesses, we've got our neurological, cardiovascular problems, our autoimmune problems. Okay, lots of young kids with autism are getting great benefits from it because the brain needs and loves and thrives with oxygen.
So are we recognizing that autism has something to do with not giving them, not supplying it enough into the brain?
Well, no, this is not looking at the cause of it. It's actually just looking at what the brain benefits from. And so that recently I heard Dr. Jason Saunders refer to this, and we've had a few kids, but Jason's dealt with so many more kids.
Yes.
And he said that often a child's first words are spoken after hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber session. Okay, so for whatever reason, it was in that situation, getting that oxygen in there and allowing a young brain that can heal fast to have conditions to do so is a real plus. Now, once again, I really want to stop here and make sure people understand this is not a miracle. This is not a miracle treatment. It's not be all and end all as far as health. It's a very, very strong tool used to get oxygen at much higher levels to areas of the body that may be deprived.
Yes.
Now, once again, if a tissue is deprived and we're getting much more oxygen there, you can equate that result yourself. It is going to do what it can do and heal and function at a higher level.
You know, if I think about people who get older and, you know, often bones get more brittle. And to me, what I've seen sort of with elderly people is if then they accidentally fall and a bone breaks and they go to the hospital for that, sort of the beginning of the end, because I think no movement has effects on the cells, on the movement of oxygen through the body.
Fantastic.
And so if I think about that, because to me it's just such a pivotal point. When I hear, you know, my grand broke her hip or you know, or again a bone of some sort, I always feel that's a very, very difficult time to get through because of how stagnant they are in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So thinking about hyperbaric chamber, that could really bridge that and make sure that still the oxygen goes where it needs to go, even though the body has to be stationary for a while,
No,
right?
100%. And what's really important to understand is, once again, please go online, Google Scholar, osteoporosis, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Okay, so learn the mechanisms why that can help people in that condition and how it can help people avoid getting in that condition. Yeah?
Wow, yeah.
One, that's the bone, okay?
Yeah.
Two, and we need to get these people active again because it's very dangerous to be immobile for too long. Second one, it upregulates collagen synthesis. So when we're talking about collagen, we're thinking about soft tissues, tendons, cartilage, muscles.
Right.
Giving that strength, helping that healing process to support those bones that may have been fractured.
Right.
Yeah. So on that level as well, once again, go and investigate that. I don't want anyone to take what I'm saying here today literally. I want them to do their own research.
And here's my point on oxygen. I found that so striking. When you go on Google, there is so many medical studies around hyperbaric chambers. That is wonderful because it means we can talk about it freely and say, well, it's actually backed up by science. That's great. But also there's a very different level for many people to understand that this is definitely going in the direction they want to go. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's one thing
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's why I wanted to start today just with people realizing that the first thing a baby does is breathe when the baby's born. And it's the last thing we do before we pass them this life. So we do understand, most people understand, hey, why are we breathing? It's for the oxygen. It's to expel CO2. You know, like oxygen is a requirement of life. Like if you put things into perspective, how long can we go without eating?
I don't know. Well, actually, months.
Months, exactly. Months and months, yeah. How long can we go without water?
I don't know, a day or two?
Let's say 7 to 10 days. Some people do water fast. They say that, well, not fast from water, I should say. They say they go longer, but around that time. Yeah, it's a requirement of life, as food is as well. These are the things that most people associate with the requirements of life. Oxygen. How long can we live without oxygen?
Gee, a couple of minutes?
3 to 6 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Gee.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you put it in perspective, you're like, okay, this is important. And if I'm going to go one more above that, there's something that's even more vital than oxygen, and that is nervous impulses from the brain to the body.
Okay.
That brain up here needs to coordinate everything that's happening in the body.
Yeah.
If that's cut, that organ won't function. Imagine the heart. Where's its impulses come from? The brain, right?
Yeah, right.
Imagine if you cut that nerve that goes to the heart.
Not so good.
No. So if we're dealing with something that can improve brain function and the brain coordinates everything else in the body, that makes sense.
So here's something that I noticed using your chamber. So that's, and we will talk again about the atmospheres in a bit, but you know, I normally run it mostly on 2 atmospheres. But ever since you educated me, I also stop at 1.3 and 1.5.
Yes.
Then going to 2. Normally an hour a day, probably 5 to 6 days a week. Anyway, so we've been doing this probably for, I want to say 2 months. We, meaning my wife and I. And both, so I'm thinking like, gee, I have a better understanding of how I think. It's almost like I could now separate sort of different parts of my brain. There's just like an overall understanding that my mental capacity is different, for sure. And so I actually asked Gemini, using Gemini mostly, hey, could it be that I have become more intelligent because it really feels like that using hyperbaric chambers? And it comes back and says, well, the short answer is yes, probably. And then it explains why. My wife, she said, look, it's really odd, but, I started a YouTube channel during that time. I had it on my mind a little bit, but somehow using this for a month triggered me to do that because I think what it is, the mental capacity, And so I guess when I ask you especially about the brain, what is it exactly that happens that the brain is affected by it?
Yeah, great question. So I got my chamber as an investment in my longevity, okay? Living well for as long as I can. And that's what I noticed as well. I felt happier, felt clearer. I felt my memory improved, okay? And I felt more grounded. So if we go into it, and my process has been nice because I've bought this as a client, had used it before 15 years ago, and then I've studied a course and then created a course. So I've immersed myself deep in this. So what actually happens is that it increases something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is what goes and regenerates and creates new neurons.
So is it a measure of how many neurons you produce newly?
It's not a measure. It's actually, it's once again on a genetic level, okay? And we are actually creating new neurons. So if there's new neuronal networks, we have more capacity to learn, to remember, to focus, to concentrate. So that makes sense. There's this very easy and pure science around that. And once again, go online, study that up. So we're not imagining it. And that's for people like us that are asymptomatic. So I have a photo that I don't need to show you on my phone.
I have seen it.
You've seen it, okay?
Yes.
This lady, she's a real sweetie, 82 years of age. She had a melanoma that combined with another health problem and quite possibly a medication that was used to deal with it, just had her to the point where there were lesions all down her upper and lower leg, on the right leg. She had the threat of amputation as a possibility. She didn't want to take any more medication. She was like, I don't care, I'm over it. She got in contact with me and she told me about her situation. So I got her up to a slightly stronger chamber than what I have, Dr. Reza on the Gold Coast.
Good guy.
Because I just wanted to give her the strongest possible, which was only 2.4. It wasn't hospital grade. Hospitals, a lot of doctors within hospitals are unaware of it. It's incredible. It's in the same hospital they work, but because they're focused on their specialty, they're unaware of the benefits or even the fact that they have a chamber. Anyway, she did 22 sessions of 2 hours. You've seen the photo.
Yeah.
Absolutely
It's
gone, resolved.
Completely gone.
There's little scars where the lesions were gone. And she ended up buying herself a cell regen soft shell chamber.
Yeah, great.
Now, interestingly, I mentioned Breathe Studios in Byron Bay. This is a really nice project because
Beautiful.
What you see, I work from home, and I was seeing a whole variety of health problems that I was sharing this with my clients. A whole variety of problems improve. I'm like, well, hang on. There's no centers that are solely dedicated to mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Okay, as I said, there was one on the Gold Coast, Dr. Reza. He's a doctor, and it's a little stronger. So I imagine he gets more pathological challenges than most. But we opened a center up in Byron Bay. And the beautiful thing there is that we are receiving, firstly, people that knew about it, but didn't know it was available. And I still hope that more and more places open because people need it. People are doing their research and they realize that they need access to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. But this, our center in Byron Bay, incredibly has received, once again, people with a variety of health conditions. And when you're working with them and listening to them, I'm just in awe of the human body. I'm not in awe of the chambers. I know how that works. But I'm in awe of what the body can do when it's given the conditions to heal.
Wow.
And so we've used two extreme cases there, haven't we? We used a lady who almost had her leg amputated and yourself and myself with improved memory.
Yes.
But, we've had a couple of women, for example, who couldn't get pregnant. And we included that in their I guess, program to increase fertility.
Yes.
With success. Now, once again, please understand, I'm not saying this treats that and this is the reason. But when you're combining it with many other things and realize that the cells of an organ with more energy will help that organ function better. If you've had a condition like endometriosis or something in the past and there's old lesions, maybe there was surgery, maybe certain organs were left with less oxygen and we can get more oxygen there. Wow, let the body do what it does and you might see something incredible happen. You can soon understand why we're seeing such a variety of situations that are improved via hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
It's incredible that you don't have to have that many sessions. Like how if you go to the gym, to me, like it's only visible after 6 months properly, and so on. If you do it almost every day, versus oxygen chambers, as you said, some benefits after 5, after 10, after 20 sessions, and then the severe cases 40 sessions, which really can be done, in a month and a bit.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a lot. It really isn't. It takes me back to my mum yesterday.
Yeah.
Poor thing. She's had this flu. She went to hospital for another reason and they couldn't do that procedure that she was going to do because her oxygen saturation was 72%. We started this by saying, hey, it should be up around 96 to 98.
Like, it is a real standard for the human body.
Yeah.
It's not like, that's not rare, that's what you would normally expect, right?
And once again, that means that 96 to 98% of what we're breathing in regards to oxygen gets absorbed at the cellular level, at the red blood cell. Mum was 72. However, they got her up and they got her to take a few deep breaths and measured it then. Went up to 92, like that.
Wow.
So why am I saying that? It shouldn't surprise us that when the body gets the oxygen in there, it can be measured fast. Okay, and then if that's in there at pressure for 1 hour and we realize that all of those functions that I mentioned are benefited, that if one of those or more of those functions are affected by a certain condition, that we'll expect results. Now, many people go in and go, I didn't feel anything. Hey, I'm not feeling anything right now breathing in air, or oxygen. But I know it's crucial for life.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need, I'd highly suggest, do your research, understand the mechanism behind it. Once again, let the body do the job. But most times people come out and go, oh my God, I slept better. Okay, so this year I worked with the Parramatta Eels. And a couple of the guys that were using it came and they said before their training, after waking up, can it affect your sleep? And you're like, yeah, most definitely. Why? What have you noticed? My HRV has never been this high.
Wow.
They were at their most intense training camp before the season started. Yeah. My deep sleep's never been this high. Another one said, I've never had a score that wasn't restless. And I had a score that was, like I didn't move all night. So brain, sleep, oxygen. You know what I mean? Like,
incredible.
There's just so many different facets that I'm noticing that people are benefiting and observing, whether they feel it or not. Remember, whether they feel it or not.
Yeah. I still want to talk to you about the different pressures, but just one thing, when you talk about teams and that, we had a session recently in a dual, what do you call it, dual chamber?
Yes, dual chamber. We've at Breathe Studios in Byron, we have a dual chamber, which means that 2 people can go in there. It's very big. So if someone, for example, has claustrophobia, it's a real shame to see them miss out on their opportunity. That chamber's fantastic for that. Okay, and I'll take a little deviation saying, if anyone is claustrophobic, please come in and what we'll do is show you the chamber, explain to you how it works. We'll let you sit in it with the door open. If you come in multiple times, that's fine. We'll do what we've got to do for you to understand what's going on and overcome that. And also, everyone should always know that you're never locked in there.
That's right.
At any moment, if you need to get yourself out, you have access to the exact same buttons and mechanisms inside as what we do outside. We don't want anyone to do that. That's why we're there. okay, call an assistant and we'll help you there. But psychologically, that's a bit like being, when you're locked in a lift. Not locked, when an elevator stops. What happens? It's that fear of not being able to get out, really, because we're in there to go up and down. We're not worrying about it until something happens. So it's a similar thing. But that dual chamber that you mentioned, that's one beautiful benefit. And the other benefit is that we met in that chamber and we had a meeting there, which is great.
No, it feels very spacious, and the acoustic is not different, which is funny because you would think like, with the pressure that it must be different, but as soon as you equalize, it's just the same. So I really like that aspect because sometimes, our health regime can take us away from our loved ones and that type of thing. With the dual chamber or even bigger, you can still have a social interaction there. Yeah.
Totally, yeah. You can take kids in there, and then that happens. For example, it'd be daunting for a child to be in a chamber by themselves. So if a parent can go in there
that's a
and
good
help them.
point.
Remember, we're not just talking about adults. There's many, many childhood challenges, illnesses that need and will benefit from hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about your friend Dr. Reza. He has he's specialized in children anyway, isn't he?
Yeah.
Isn't he? And so therefore, a lot of his clients or the people that actually use the hyperbaric
Kids.
are the kids, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Imagine, it happens a lot. Kids with concussion, big falls, where they're not improving. You'll get typically a child doing a protocol for concussions, 10 sessions.
Wow.
And the sooner after the trauma, the better.
Yeah.
Okay, but that if we went to another example where stroke, same thing. Like if someone's had a stroke, the sooner the better. This is once again studied and observed. But even if it's been a while, there other doctors, this hasn't happened with myself, but other practitioners and doctors in the field are noticing that someone might have had a stroke 2 years ago, and they're noticing fast changes. So it's a bit like, I would say, it's a little bit like a certain plant in your garden. I've got a couple that, like frangipanics, for example. What happens there? It looks like they haven't been, I cut them off and they're still alive, months later. But anyway, there's a plant that we'd look at and go, nah, I can't get that back.
Yeah.
And then you change the conditions around what that plant requires. Give it some sunlight, water it, some soil, away it goes. So we're seeing something very similar with the brain. And that's going back to that belief earlier on that we were taught at university that neurons die, and when they die, they don't come back, as opposed to going, guess what? They've been dormant. For whatever reason, whatever health situation that a life has put in front of that neuron, it's been dormant, and it can be reactivated via oxygen. So this is why you can never think, but it's been 2 or 3 years since that condition, that heart attack, that stroke. Give it a go.
If I sort of summarize what I've heard you saying about this type of condition, that you might have had something like this mold exposure and other things, or the concussion. So if I understand it right, then first of all, you want to stop whatever accelerates it. Yeah. So stop boxing if you had a concussion. Would be good. Good idea.
Yeah, right? Take the cause away. Let's look. Firstly find the cause. That's a challenge,
that's right.
isn't it?
Yeah. So take that away, and then your body might not have the extra power it might be, if you would be healthy, it can maintain the body.
Good.
But at the moment where you have an injury of some sort, inflammation of some sort, the body says, I don't have more resources to throw at this. I might be able to contain it, but I definitely can't get that back to how it should be.
Great description. Really great way of describing it.
And so when you then push oxygen into, particularly into the plasma and therefore into the cells around the concussion, is that sort of what happens, as well as the liver being able to create, you have more stem cells, so that create actually the building blocks to rebuild the area that is broken and so on. Is that sort of what happens?
Totally. Remembering that these networks, whether they be neuronal or vascular around injury sites, are often injured in that injury. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just that one tissue, it's the surrounds. Yeah. By using pressure and high concentrations of oxygen, we get it to those areas.
Yes, and as you said, cells get better output, being they're really vibrant, they work better. And on top of that, and that sort of relates to it, the powerhouses and energy bits, which is the mitochondria, you might not, have a low count of like 100 in one cell. It pushes it up to whatever, 200 or even more, and therefore being absolutely more effective of replacing,
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that increase in the number of mitochondria and efficiency happens very fast. Literally in those first, 3 to 5 sessions.
Wow.
Actually, no, not 3 to 5, 1 to 5,
Yeah.
progressively.
Yeah.
There, a lot of people, let's say someone's had an autoimmune problem for years. Sometimes we get challenges around, look, I've done 3 sessions and I didn't feel anything. It'd be a little bit like being overweight, going to the gym, needing to lose weight, understanding why, but really just giving the gym a week or 2 and going, no, it didn't work.
Yeah.
It's a process. And what I encourage people to think about is that the same processes that occurred or didn't occur to take someone from a healthy state at one point in their life to a less healthy state later on, we've got to appreciate it's not one day to the next. Healing happens surprisingly fast. That's what blows me away about the body. The body's got an amazing innate ability to heal itself. You get a 90 or 95-year-old person, if they cut their finger, even though they're 90 or 95 years of age, their finger will heal. The body heals itself. If it doesn't have a blockage and if it's getting a sufficiency of nutrients that it needs to heal.
Yeah.
Recognizing that oxygen is a major nutrient in this process and we can get it there at higher levels, it's easy to understand why people heal fast using this.
Yeah, wow. Now let's talk about the different pressures. So, and maybe also about the sort of chambers that can facilitate that.
Yeah.
So in my chamber, for example, I can have 1, well, no much benefit there. That would be just oxygen therapy. Then 1.3, 1.5, 1.8, and 2. I gather, because those are the stages, there must be something special about those that I can select them.
Yeah, good question. Some chambers, I just visited the factories in China, 3 or 4 factories, and some of them are offering 1.1. Let's say in a 1.3 chamber, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Yeah?
Oh, okay.
And then other chambers I saw had 1.4, 1.6, 1.82, for example. So just because they're the ones that are most commonly quoted doesn't mean that it has to be that particular one. Remember that each one of these represents a depth. So 1.3 is 9 feet underwater.
9 feet underwater, yeah.
2 is 33 feet underwater. And then you could figure out, those other ones that way. So we're at a moment where I think even the people who are most studied in hyperbaric oxygen therapy will admit that because each human body is different in its state of health and the variables that put it in that state means that you can't 100% apply a certain pressure to a certain number of sessions, like X amount of protocols. So these studies, what they do, they give us a guide. But ultimately, you need to work with people, and this is why we open Breathe Studios. You need to work with people who are putting consideration into your condition and what your goals are. And if your goals are this based on that, this is the number of sessions and the pressure that we recommend. So let's say, for example, there's some sort of brain inflammation is the goal. And that could be studied via blood tests or a clear and obvious head trauma. Hey, we've already mentioned 1.5. We won't go above 1.5. Okay, we'll nurture it that way. But we will most probably we will start actually at 1.3 and we'll build up. So this is where we get into a person-to-person variable.
Okay.
Where, let's say someone, and this has happened in Breathe Studios, where someone's come in and said, no, I want to go to 2. Like, it's often a tug of war, and we'll talk about it.
Is it more the males?
Yeah, exactly. And I had a great case recently. A really nice guy who had arsenic poisoning. Had. In his mind, it was previous. What he didn't know is that even though tests had shown it come down, he still had levels in his body. So that when we went on this process, I advised him, hey, you know what, let's nurture this, because if we go too high too fast, the liver is going to do its job better, but that won't feel good, because if you're going through a Hersheimer reaction and you're getting that release of arsenic, well, we've got to support that. Anyway, he did 1 or 2 sessions at 1.3 and then quickly went up to 2. And what do you know? He was in bed that weekend. Now, do I think that's bad? No, I don't. And luckily, I was dealing with someone who understood. He knew what he was playing with. But a lot of people wouldn't. They just equate going to a higher pressure and getting sick, or hyperbaric oxygen therapy and feeling worse. when we're talking about a detox process, or when we're talking about like a die-off of parasites, for example, as well, an endotoxin release, these processes need to be supported depending how toxic someone is, Yeah. And then thoughtfully, with experience and knowledge, putting out a protocol based on that person's challenge.
Yeah.
So I know that was a long-winded answer there, but hopefully you'll understand it's not simply pressure, but there's a very mindful increase in pressure, always checking in with the person.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when people get to 2, because I've mentioned already the brain's sensitive, for some people 2 will stimulate them, 2 will affect their sleep, but 1.5 won't. Okay, it doesn't mean that it's bad. No, it doesn't. It just means that we need to listen to them and also use that as one more factor that we use in the protocol recommendation to have them on for a certain period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I know this a little bit from infrared therapy. If someone has been, for example, a painter, been exposed to lead or something like that for years and years, you know, decades of that, and then you go into an infrared sauna, what we normally say is leave the door open. Don't change it to anything but room temperature, because there is still therapy happening to your body, and the increase will release, the lead into your body, and you have to deal with it. You have to use chlorella or, greens in general, whatever you do, right?
Totally, yeah.
And so that feels strange for these people, because they're like, I want to sweat, I want to be in sauna. You cannot. And what they found is, even after a short, so we'd also say, have just 20 minutes. The first time I was like, that's not really long. What do you mean by that? And anyway, hopefully they comply. And then they say, I had headaches, I could feel the detox, it's intense. And so we would say, well, stay with that protocol, as mild as it might seem, because it's so effective, especially if you have a good infrared sauna with the right wavelengths, it will release enough for you.
Exactly.
And then you can build up, as you can see the symptoms after the session have changed. And when you talk about the pressure, the one function that I now understand from you is like, we're talking especially about the saturation of plasma. There's a multiplier or a factoring based on how much pressure there is. That means how much oxygen is in that, which means the function of your body will be boosted. So, the more oxygen you have in the plasma, the more gets to the cells in, for example, your liver, and your liver goes wild. The more you give it, the more it will actually do. Because that's a wonderful thing about the body, is it wants to heal, right? It wants to optimize.
It's driven towards healing, as long as we're not blocking it.
Yeah, but you can't give it too much.
You can't give it too much.
Because the flow-on effects, it's not really that the liver can't deal with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it's more like you release too much too early, and then other functions of your body have to keep up with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in bed all weekend.
No, it's a really good point. And look, a lot of people understand this analogy. If they come in and you and I, we look after our health. We're vigilant around our health, okay? If we went for a run right now, and we hadn't run for a while, we might do 5 or 10K and deal with it okay, and back up. We'll be sore tomorrow, but we'll back up fast.
Yeah.
If someone hasn't run for a very long time, but they're toxic, they're dealing with other conditions, and they need to be supported, and walking would be better, but then they go and run, hey, they mightn't do it again.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
They'll be that deterred by it, firstly. Secondly, they'll be affected. They might injure an already inflamed tissue. That might take weeks or months to heal. So very similar. When you're looking at person-by-person protocols, you've got to look at, if we put that person in there at too fast, then that reaction could actually have them recovering for a lot longer than what they need to, as opposed to nurturing it. And you mentioned a really important thing about the saunas and the degree of toxicity and supporting it via binders. It's very important also, if we're dealing with a toxic condition, a detox situation, well, we want to support that, because we know that if those, the liver's doing its job better, it's expelling them. But are they leaving the body? Same when you do a sauna. Hey, you're sweating. You're drawing heavy metals out of tissues. But are you binding them? Are they being removed? Or do you need to bind them and go through the full process of removing them properly? Because if not, it's a little bit like, imagine 2 dirty sponges in a bucket, and you're just going to squeeze one sponge. Hey, toxins are leaving that sponge, aren't they? After, let's say, washing many cars.
Yeah.
If you don't go in and remove those ones, they're going to be absorbed by the other one. and then eventually the same sponge again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, our organs, our skin, our fat, our brain, they're very spongy. they like to, and they can sponge up toxins.
What I like about you talking about that in particular is that you look at the microscopic level through live blood analysis. I don't know the legal side of these things, and you probably can't use it as a diagnostic tool. But if you're just inquisitive and you just want to see what actually do I see on the blood level, I mean, that when you take a sample, that includes the plasma.
Yes. Yeah, really, I'm glad you went this way. Yeah. So firstly, it's not diagnostic. And secondly, it is inquisitive. It helped me years ago when I had mercury toxicity, because often when you see a heavy metal, toxicity situation, you'll also see a prevalence of mold, and a prevalence of parasites. Okay, they're related.
When you say see, you can see them.
Yeah, you'll observe that. And that was done with me 20 years ago in Brazil.
Yeah.
By a neurologist, actually. Been a neurologist 40 years, and thank God I met him, because he recognized that there was candida and mold in my blood, and it's in the plasma. This is what we see.
It sort of lives there?
Yeah, it hosts it. So if the biological terrain, which is what we refer to as the plasma, is allowing that to live there due to typically pH and lack of oxygen, then you can understand if we're getting more oxygen into the plasma, then they will probably be affected first.
Yes.
But they'll also die off in the plasma.
Okay.
So from mold, you get mycotoxins and you get endotoxins from parasites. So you're not only getting the toxin itself in there, their byproduct, but you're also getting the dead mold and the dead parasite in your plasma. So that's where this reaction comes from.
And you can see this, huh?
Well, no, you can't see that.
You can't see that.
No, you can't see it.
Can you see oxygen?
No, you can't see that
but
either.
you can see red blood cells.
All I can
around.
see is, for example, the effect of blood after 5, 10, 15 sessions, and see that what was there before is not there now.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with me. This is when I first was exposed to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, that I had candida and mold in my blood off the charts, anaerobic bacteria as well. And it blew me away. I saw it on the doctor's screen. I could not believe it. There's a couple of interventions. Okay, hyperbaric was only one of them. But after doing, let's say, 2 or 3 sessions a week for 2 weeks, testing my blood again, it was like, my goodness,
Really?
It was clear, nothing in it.
So, and it's probably a double whammy in the sense of like you change you call it terrain,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
oxygen, prevents, well, it certainly makes it less pleasant and you get die of mold and candida and those, because they can't live when oxygen is not the preferred
Fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And then as it dies off and you do oxygen therapy, you also then have a better functioning liver and other organs that then actually help to take it out of it, right? Because otherwise you were talking about microtoxicity, which is
removing that.
it's dead,
Yeah.
but it's still an
It
issue
needs to be
because it
removed,
hasn't.
Yeah,
Right.
just like those cells we were talking about before,
Yes.
in autophagy.
Yeah.
What's really important to understand is that this is all observational.
Yes.
What you see under microscopes, observational. There's no studies, or not many that I know of, that have gone and done this. So if someone's like, oh, show me the research. It's literally, you got to go and speak to these people, and if you trust them, ask them what they're observing. That's what I've observed.
Yeah.
Is it diagnostic? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Would I base a whole treatment course off it? No, I wouldn't. Could I use it to measure at one measure? Yes, I could.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
So when we go back to sort of the pressures, I remember you mentioning epigenetics at one stage to me. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the idea there that sits behind pressure and epigenetics?
Okay, so your genes have a function, but the environment can affect the gene in regards to how it will express itself.
Okay.
That is epigenetics.
Yes.
Yeah. Knowing this, it's great, because it makes us realize that most problems aren't genetic. Most problems through lifestyle, poor habits, insufficiency of nutrients and an excess of toxins result in the gene expressing itself in a way that's not favorable to our health.
Yes.
Yeah. And if we're talking about the hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, we mentioned one gene, BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. That's the gene that increases neurogenesis. There's VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. So that's how we get the creation of new blood networks. And a whole lot of other genes. We mentioned the cytokines. They're all genetic. Pro-inflammatory cytokines, anti-inflammatory cytokine. So the oxygen under pressure is helping that gene express itself to be able to upregulate a certain function, which in the case of BDNF is the creation of new neurons. Yeah. However, there's many conditions that we are all doing unknowingly in a modern world that's down-regulating those genes. So epigenetically, they're being expressed at a lower level of function. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. And that's only a few that we mentioned, but there's many genes, like countless, that are being expressed in a way that was different to the way they would have been expressed 1,000 or 10,000 years ago, before we're exposed to so many of the things we're exposed to now.
Yeah.
You know?
Are there many sort of conditions where you say you really have to be careful sort of how high pressure you go? You mentioned toxicity was one, you know.
Yeah. So I think contraindications is important. Yeah. What are the contraindications? So the contraindications, firstly, is anybody who cannot equalize. If you can't get in that chamber and equalize, well, you're running the risk of burst ear, tympanic membrane injury there. Pneumothorax, which means that the thorax is not containing air, or oxygen. So, like a punctured lung, for example, or pathological conditions that would challenge that. There are certain medications, particularly and mainly certain chemotherapy drugs that are contraindicated because it'll affect their efficiency. Claustrophobia, definitely a contraindication, and a few others. Okay, they're not common, but look, anyone coming in, the first thing they do, they sign their waiver at Breathe Studios, and they'll be very aware of, hey, if you've got this, and this going on, today's not the day. And look, the most common is a cold or flu that's going to challenge someone's ability to equalize.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. What I found fascinating is that it is a normal environment that you're in, which means you can actually work on your laptop if you actually do it on a regular basis. You could do anything really in there. And because it's targeted, the oxygen is targeted to actually just breathe to your breath, it's not in the whole space. There is no safety concern.
No.
About it. It's interesting. People brought it up. I had never heard about it. So you explained to me, yes, you can do that. I wasn't even aware that some people are aware that they could be not 100% oxygen, as you explained. That's an accelerant.
Exactly.
That's a problem.
It's an accelerant. Yeah. So it's a really good point. There's a lot of people that may go online and read something that's not accurate, or they may confuse a certain event that has occurred in the last couple of years. There's been an explosion, for example, in a hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber at a hospital level, and that at one point would be not following protocols or something that wasn't looked at.
Not maintained properly, maybe.
Who knows, like 100% oxygen, a spark, you know what I mean? Like that's all it takes. Now, that's an explosion. What a chamber, especially a soft chamber, if it had too much pressure, one of the seals will open. So I won't refer to that as exploding. It'll just, it'll escape. Yeah. The other thing is that confusion is the technology. So cheap lithium batteries can explode anywhere, even on planes. And I just look at the airlines. It's like, okay, well, everyone's got a mobile phone up there, or a laptop, or an iPad, and they're allowing that. There's no incidents, though we may see that change, because I think that they need to, I'm all in favour of people examining and knowing what sort of technology taking on, because some are clearly have poor track records. But if you're in a chamber, and if one of those batteries happens to explode, like, we're seeing this a lot with e-bikes, poor quality lithium batteries, then you're in a chamber. It's going to take a minute or two to get out. Yeah. Now, if you're in a mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber, and by the way, you would never, ever be allowed to take that technology into a hospital grade.
Right.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But in a mild one, what's the safest thing you can tell people in regards to technology and a mild chamber? Hey, don't go in there.
Yeah.
There's no chance of it exploding.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, be informed that if you do, and if there's a problem, it's going to take a while to get you out.
Yes.
Now, recently when I was in China, I've been fascinated by this for a while, and I wanted to do an experiment. So I asked the manufacturer to get a candle and put it inside the chamber, no mask, just put oxygen straight in there.
Yeah.
And we measured that.
Yeah.
I've got all this video, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And so that chamber, we got it up to 45%.
Oxygen,
And the
right,
candle simply increased by about 20 or 30%. So we're giving it more fuel, aren't we? If you've ever tried to light a match in a cave or somewhere there's less oxygen, well, it's harder to get that match, the light. So that's the phenomenon we're talking about. I'd suggest if anyone's worried about it, don't do it.
Yeah.
If not, just be aware, deal with good equipment and be aware of the risks. Now, another thing you could do to guarantee safety, or not guarantee ever, but, protect yourself, a fire blanket. So if you do have something like that in there, and if the unthinkable happens, boom. But what's most important here is not to say that the chamber itself causes the explosion.
Yeah.
Or
It's
cause
something
it.
you bring into
Exactly.
it. Yes.
In the same way that if it ever happened in an airline or an aeroplane, same deal. Dodgy equipment. And that's why we have to declare, hey, have you got any batteries going under? They want to know what's in our baggage, and we've got to sign off on that beforehand.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's clearing up that confusion in that regard.
Why do you think it helps with sleep?
Why do I think it helps sleep? Okay, so let's go. Better brain function.
Yes.
Yeah. We know also that it supports cortisol levels, for example, if we're stressed out and prolonged stress and cortisol's elevated for a long period of time, that by supporting other systems in the body, we're removing a stress or a factor that the body was adapting to.
Yes.
Therefore, it doesn't need to keep cortisol as high for that long, prolonged periods of time. Therefore, lowering of those cortisol levels will allow melatonin to be secreted, and therefore we can go into that sleep process. Inflammation. Okay, so any situation where there's an injury, an inflammatory process going on, it'd be or pain, it'd be understandable to realize why cortisol is elevated for prolonged periods of time, because it's adapting to a painful or inflammatory process. And as that process improves, including inflammation around our brain, which I'll say I'm learning more and more about, okay, but it's a thing.
It's a thing.
Certain foods can trigger that off very fast. And I like to refer to inflammatory load, where it's a bit like a glass filling up with water. Until that glass, the water's at the top, you're not symptomatic yet. But that, let's say, refer to that as the inflammatory load. Well, by lowering inflammation in general, we're avoiding that symptomatic stage. And quite possibly with sleep, when inflammation's involved with brain inflammation or something else, then we're symptomatic, and insomnia for some people is one of the effects of that. So I'd say there's a lot to do with the inflammation as well. Mitochondria, of course, every cell doing its job better just has a body that's able to regenerate better at the end of the day. Stem cells, what do stem cells do? They help regenerate. If you're increasing the number of stem cells, that it's going and helping the body and taking that load off that predominantly occurs at nighttime.
Gotcha.
It's a lot of people think, at nighttime we go to sleep and lights out. Not at all. It's a physiologically very active time.
Yeah.
It's a recovery time, isn't it?
I've been thinking about something that little trick you told me. You said, look, when you're in your chamber, take the oxygen mask off every now and then. Is that your sort of like just...
No. No, that's not mine. That's actually across the board recommendation, because that's called an oxygen break.
Okay.
And in that 5 minutes, after about 25 minutes in the chamber, your brain perceives that decrease in oxygen as a relative hypoxic state.
Okay.
So when we're in a hypoxic state, meaning a state with no oxygen, in this case it's lowered oxygen, the brain upregulates a whole lot of other juicy physiological functions, beneficial functions.
Yeah.
And that's why we do that, to benefit from those functions.
Okay.
It's a little bit like we mentioned before, going to altitude to train with less oxygen, okay? You'll get creation of red blood cells with time. No, it's not immediate.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's that. It's the whole thing also these days around when we get into a sauna or an ice bath, where we're getting into adversity, or we're putting the body in a situation where it's got to adapt.
Yeah.
That is actually hormetic stress. And hormetic stress brings a whole lot of benefits to the right case. Yeah. But in general, I'd say that's a really good practice for most people to do after about 20, 25 minutes.
You know, when I first had my chamber, I would do it every day. And then I sort of like looked online to like what's actually optimal, you know, like how many should I? And there was that number of, you can do 60 sessions, but after that, the benefits would drop unless you give it also a break. Is that sort of a similar thing?
Yeah, really important. Yeah, like most people, I'd say, once again, depending on their situation, but if they were looking at 20, 30, 40 sessions, then most of the time we'd be saying, okay, if it's acute and you need, you know, this is like post-surgery or an inflammatory situation, we might do 5 times a week and then have the weekend off, yeah, and do that for a month. But with time, when we've achieved that initial protocol, whatever we agree upon for that protocol, we'll decrease it. Now, should we stop? Some people say when you finish that initial one, just do a maintenance. What's the maintenance? It depends. It depends on your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, me personally, my maintenance is 2 or 3 times a week. You know, it supports me greatly with sleep and my stress levels and all the rest, cortisol. However, a lot of people who've used this as a tool for their cancer get to a point where they go, okay, I've done it. It's, you know, no more. And we do know that that is not advisable.
Okay.
Because once again, the body's gone from a highly saturated oxygen state to a relatively low one. When I say relative, it's still there, you're still breathing, but it's perceived as a great relative difference. Then there's certain research that indicates that cancer cells might go, oh, hang on, here we go, let's go again.
Yeah.
So I'd say everyone needs to look at the causative factor, what's going on, and understand that, you know, certain conditions will require lifetime support. Alzheimer's or some sort of degenerative neurological problem. We're not going to want to do an initial, you know, 40 to 60 and then leave it because we know that it's degenerative. So many people, we're going to hold it. We're going to slow down the degenerative condition, especially in situations where we don't know what the cause is. Yeah?
Just remind me, because it fascinates me so much. What exactly is why do neurons expand again? Like, is it the pressure that does it? Like, you know how you said
the BDNF.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that just like a gene basically knowing this is the environment where I can grow, and that's what divers were observed to have when they dive regularly? And
well, one of the benefits, but BDNF, it can be down-regulated or up-regulated, and the chamber's up-regulating it. So if that is involved in the process, which there's many other factors, but if it is, well, that is one extra tool. Okay, so recently I had a man with Parkinson's, and his complaint, he was functioning, he said he didn't feel it, but he was going to the toilet maybe 7 to 8 times a night. Yeah, and to tell you the truth, I'm not sure the correlation with Parkinson's and urination like that at night, but he said, look, after the first session, he went twice.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, great. So if he can have a more restful sleep, it gives his body support, his brain support, and it can do its job better.
Wow.
Yeah? But once again, I don't want the whole attention to be just on oxygen, because the brain also requires movement. And I'm seeing a high correlation with men, particularly with Alzheimer's, who are still exercising, and Parkinson's. And, you know, legit weights and exercise and all the rest, getting great results. And others that are accelerating, you know, and coincidentally or not exercising. So they need to consider that. They need to consider diet, you know, and having good quality fats. The brain's 80% fat, so you need to give that organ what it needs, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense too. You know, I grew up knowing that Michael Jackson is using a oxygen tent. At least that was the German language translated into oxygen tent. And you know, and people were joking about it a lot, saying like he's worried that there's no oxygen in the air now, and he needs special air and so on. Most likely that was a hyperbaric chamber, right?
Yeah, it was. It was a hyperbaric chamber, and it was actually, you know what the media does, they sort of take things out of context, but that was something he used after he was burned. He had his burns from filming the Pepsi ad. Yeah. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is incredible for burns, healing from an injury from the burn, And he actually donated that when he'd finished it. So he wasn't sleeping in it. It was taken out of context and everything else, but it was fundamental in his healing process.
Amazing.
Yeah, so once again, remember, stronger chambers, hospital grade chambers, life or death situations, burns, losing your hearing, losing eyesight, losing a limb. That's the way to think about that sort of situation and challenge. And then for the rest of us that have degenerative problems, we can go mild. It's not life or death. We want to nurture it. We want to do it slowly, and we can do it slowly in a mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about that. So if we know that it's so good for burns, every hospital should have these just for
Many
that.
do.
Many do?
Many do, yeah.
Wow.
Many more than what people realize. Could you go and access that for the problems we've been talking about? No. Generally, they're insurance covered, and there's a small list of conditions that usually are life-threatening that you would have access to it if you had those.
Wow.
This is why people need to do their research right now. Quite possibly, if you're listening to this and you're relating this to a situation you're in right now, well, you'd start to wonder, okay, what if? And the great thing is, worst case scenario for anything like this is, hey, you won't feel anything.
Yeah.
But you can guarantee there's going to be a whole lot of benefits, 100% proven, and you'll see this in scientific research occurring at a level, a cellular level, a genetic level, that you may or may not feel. However, this could be a really important tool alongside you modifying your lifestyle, getting the good stuff in, getting the nutrients in, getting the toxins out and avoiding them, and just letting your body do what it does best. Getting it away from the cause.
I got a question for you. So nutrients are broken down by the digestive system and absorbed into the plasma,
Right?
right?
I know. So you're talking about when we eat?
When we eat, yeah.
Okay.
So the plasma is what brings...
Stomach, liver, plasma. Okay,
Gotcha.
Liver. You were talking about bloodstream, delivery to a cell.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's mostly glucose and...
Yeah, because we've talked about oxygen being fuel, but there's also glucose, isn't there?
Yeah.
You know, yeah. It's
So
another-
would pressure make any difference to this type of delivery and absorption, do you think?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen much studied on that. I mean, look, if we're talking about absorption, if we're talking about a difficulty in delivery, yes.
Right.
Okay? If we're talking about, let's say, an intestinal wall that's leaky gut and that's too permeable, yes, because it's going to help repair. Or an intestinal wall that's inflamed, it's going to help inflammation. Or a liver that's not doing its job properly, yes. So yeah, on that level, 100%. But will the pressure actually get nutrients and force them in? There's nothing that I've seen, folks, there, and it's a different mechanism.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
You know, some people talk about the future as being a really abundant one, which is possible. You know, if manual labor sort of can be bridged, then, you know, food and items, goods and so on could be incredibly cheap, and that could be abundance for the world. I mean, it would be amazing. And you know, you're starting this by having created Breathe Studio and the education that goes with it, that this is something that anyone can access at one stage. It
Yeah.
would be amazing for humanity to have these tools just readily available.
No, it really would be. I mean, look, to let people understand that I'm a chiropractor. I studied chiropractic, went to Peru. I'd take my table and a plastic spine to the Andes and the Amazon, and I had a huge degree of excitement and passion because I learned a tool from university and I was putting into action. And once again, I wasn't doing the healing, their body was.
Yes.
But observing what the body does when you remove a blockage, I haven't felt that degree of excitement from back in the late 90s till now.
Yes.
Coming in contact and learning and being immersed with hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah.
What's really my mission is to
Yeah.
educate people, practitioners, to the point where they're going to incorporate in their homes or in centres around Australia so that everybody has access to this.
Yes.
What's important for people to understand, we've got, if you're in the Northern Rivers or the Gold Coast, we've got Breathe Studios in Byron Bay, okay? We've got Cell Regen, which is a company that is doing incredibly in this space because Daryl, the founder, who's had his journey around Lyme's disease, he's meticulous around quality and guaranteeing that what someone pays for, they get, not only get it, but it's installed, delivered, they get support. So I'm on the phone with everybody in regards to their questions before purchasing or after, protocols. I've done an online course. So it's all there. Like, This is something at a time where it needs to be done properly. Okay, people, it'd be a shame if a fear that's not founded on something that's worth being dubious of, let's say, that's dispelled, they have the chance to question and have people who are there to listen, but also know whether it be at the studio, breathe, with the support from the staff, whether that's they purchase their own chamber, that they're getting the support. Because I know when I got my chamber, if it wasn't for Daryl, because I was looking at buying one from China and having it delivered there, boom, I'd be like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah.
What about if a technical problem arises? What about protocols? No, that is worth gold.
Yes.
Having someone here in Australia to talk you through that.
So
and
important.
since I've been on board, what I feel I've brought to the equation is firstly my own story, the passion around it. And I've got a beautiful situation where I'm seeing literally dozens of people every week with stories, with progress, with experience that I can relay to other people through what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
You know, and I always encourage people, as you've heard me say in this podcast, that go and do your own research, but just know we're a really strong resource. But go on to Google Scholar, research a condition if you have a condition, look at your goal and see what's already been studied, I should say, in that regard. And you'll be surprised there's hundreds and hundreds of articles online, scientific articles studied at a university level supporting hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, you were talking about purchasing, and it's a life as we can use it all our lives. And I'm excited to get old and have that, and basically having a different experience to what I would otherwise, when I become an elderly person at 120 or whatever. So the price point, of course you can finance it, which I believe for something that is a substantial purchase is like a small car,
sure,
car, something like that. I mean,
we're looking at soft chambers, let's say around $17,000, to a lying chamber around 44, and a seated chamber around 55. Now, I have a business. So for anyone wanting to incorporate this in their health business, it's tax deductible, obviously, and I got finance for it.
Yeah.
So that's important. But look, when you put things into perspective, I've seen people receive diagnoses that are quite serious, and they will do anything they can to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I also recognize, this is via a Harvard study many years ago now, in 2012 I think it was, that showed that 90% of what we spend on health is spent in the last 5% of our lives.
Wow.
It makes a lot more sense investing than spending.
Yeah.
Investing means we invest now before we're in that crisis state where we spend lots of money on a condition that we will not recover from because it's right at the end of our life. So, yeah, this is not directly related to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's related to health, and I'd be asking everybody, please think about this. Please, I guess, see it as being born with a lot of money in the bank. You know, we're born rich, most of us, luckily, with health, but no one teaches us how to invest. So we just spend. Then we worry about it. We've got no more money in the bank. Okay, so that's actually when we're symptomatic. Some people know how to make money again. Great. Some people don't. Please don't get to that point.
No.
Learn how to invest now, and this really is an investment in your health.
It makes sense. When you're young and healthy, you have 1,000 dreams. When you're older and sick, there's only one, and that's being healthy again, right? So why not actually...
Or young again. No, I'm joking.
yeah, and a mixture of both.
No, it's not the case, because I'm older now and I feel better than what I did when I was younger.
I'm with you there. Like, there's a lot that I really, really value about being older. And I guess that's the health span versus the lifespan, that's really, let's work on the health span. But the thing is this, yes, you want to be healthy until you're 80, 100 or whatever, but that means actually you're healthy now, which is really what is important, because, who cares what happens in 20 years?
Right.
It's really about, like, do you have vibrant health and what can you do about that? And I think hyperbaric chamber is one of those things that seems like too good to not incorporate in your regime.
Yeah. It's almost like speaking to the converted when if someone's listening to us and we're speaking because we've experienced it. And until someone goes on their journey, I understand it's pretty hard to relate to, but go deep, look at testimonials, reach out to us. It's just too powerful, too incredible not to be considered in any route, any, I guess, goal or wish list for your health-longevity.
Yeah, beautiful. And you have a lot of resources online. So I just mentioned actually your website. So it's jasongilbert.com.au.
Yes.
That's JASONGILBER. T
Yeah.
at the end, Gilbert. And then Breathe Studios.
breathestudios.com.au.
Okay. And Cell
Regen, yeah. So Breathe Studios for the studio in Byron Bay, and there'll be more opening around Australia. And Cell Regen if someone's interested in buying a chamber.
Beautiful.
Or even reach out as well in regards to what other chambers could be in your area. Like Cell Regen's got chambers all around Australia.
Oh, beautiful.
So reach out
That's great.
and, you know, we can indicate a practitioner, let's say in West Australia or Queensland or somewhere else that could help and supply their needs.
And I think what's important to mention is that using a hyperbaric chamber, you're not sitting there for an hour not being able to do anything. I mean, people operate via the phone quite a bit of their life,
Yes.
which means actually, yes, you have to drive.
You can
there.
read, you can meditate,
You can do anything.
You know,
really
do work on a laptop, you can have a meeting. Yeah.
That's true. You can have a meeting. The funny thing is, it's a bit of a sanctuary for me at home because, you know, having five young girls around, you know, like can be quite noisy. So if I want to work from home, Hyperbaric Chamber is one of those places
there
where
you go.
definitely, because
Yeah.
I can't hear what's going on outside. So when coming to your studio, it's a great space to actually, you know, be sort of
really
confined
is.
and focus on something.
Focus on, yeah.
So it's not really going out of your way other than you have to drive there, and then you can do whatever you like, and in fact it probably gives you focus too as well. So a little hurdle and little to give up really, other than a little drive. So that's awesome. And then you're on Instagram really very active as well. So that's Jason Gilbert with a T, longevity. So
That's
Jason Gilbert, longevity, all one word.
And
on
I
Instagram.
always reply to any question I get and help as much as I can. Even if they're a long way away on the other side of the world. I've got a lot of patience over there.
So thank you so much,
Mate,
for your
thank
time
you so
and
much. Awesome.
explaining that. Thanks for your work. It's incredible. It's really inspirational, and I know you have helped probably millions by now, indirectly through your work, indirectly with your patients, because you have been doing it for almost.
Oh my
4
goodness!
years.
Yeah, as I said, very gratifying being pioneer in South America.
Yeah.
In Peru, and help setting courses up, and now having my students as chiropractors who are teaching. And I was there recently actually, and I gave a lecture, and it's so gratifying seeing one of my old students now teaching, you know. So health's like that. You know, we're in a moment where we are realizing that health doesn't need to be only thought about when we lose it.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to think about it well before that.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's like investing money in the bank. It really is.
Much more accepted now that you have a pre-medical sort of or preventative has finally become mainstream.
Yes.
You know, how we have been talking even 10 years ago, it wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
And people would say, well, you know, that's alternative. It's not alternative. It's basically, there's a medical side of things, and it has a good reason to be there. We don't even have to fight it, which used to be the case. But we can agree that it makes more sense to not get sick in the first place. Or you know, mild symptoms actually work in our own means first, you know, and with advice as well. And
if you have symptoms, please use them always to find the underlying cause. Please don't just relieve those symptoms and forget about it. Your body's amazing. Listen to the signs. It will direct you to the cause.
Beautiful. Jason.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making time. And thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please press subscribe. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.